Hello, all. A very good afternoon. A warm welcome to all of you to yet another live session of Narayana IAS Academy. So, this is Sureka Bhaskar, and I am dealing with the Prelims Masterclass, especially the 100 most important topics for the upcoming Prelims examination 2025 from the subject of environment and ecology. Okay, so here, as you actually see this particular slide behind me, this, as I told you, is the fifth lecture, and let me actually take you through the number of topics that we've covered so far so that it will be a quick revision, and also we will move forward and look at the topics that we will be taking up for today's discussion. Okay, in case this is the first video you guys are watching in this particular series, I would like to inform that there are 4 more sessions that had already been completed, okay, where we had covered significant portion of the syllabus, especially from your current affairs. We've covered topics of the ecosystem. We've actually dealt with important organizations and bodies, and also we've discussed a significant number of topics in the theme climate change, and also now we've actually moved towards the biodiversity. Okay, so if you guys can recall, whoever have been following, we had actually started with this particular concept of ecosystem. This was the first topic that we had actually started with. So, to begin with, as usual, we had started with the forest ecosystem. How important and significant is this forest ecosystem? And in order to conserve that, what were the different initiatives that had actually been taken globally as well as nationally? So, we had divided this ecosystem first into forest ecosystem, and then we moved on to the ocean ecosystem, and then we also covered the other types of ecosystems. Okay, so under forest ecosystem, we discussed about the Peace Forest Initiative. We spoke about the wood certification program or the scheme. Then we also spoke about the international arrangement of forest. We spoke about the UN RED program. And in the Peace Forest Initiative, when we were discussing about the UNCCD, we also discussed about the other two Rio or the Earth Conventions. That was the UNCBD as well as UNFCCC, that is United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change. Okay. Then we also what to say, yeah, so these were the topics that we actually discussed over here, and moving forward we dealt with the ocean ecosystem, where we spoke about the high seas treaty. Okay, so whether India will sign or whether India is already a signatory and has ratified this high seas treaty or not, this is what we discussed over here. And moving forward, we saw this blue flag certification scheme by the Foundation of Environmental Education that has been given. So this actually certifies the beaches on certain criteria, okay, as the blue flag certified beach, and which is the nodal agency in India which oversees this process under which ministry. All that we had discussed over here. Okay, then we moved on to the other ecosystem, where we first discussed about the mountain ecosystem. So let me use this portion of the space. So we spoke about the mountain ecosystem in terms of mountain partnership, and then we moved on to discuss about the mangrove ecosystem, and after the mangrove ecosystem we also discussed the wetland ecosystem and its conservation under the Ramsar Convention. Okay, so the Ramsar Convention we saw, which is the first site in India to be recognized under the Ramsar Convention. Also, we discussed about the Montreux record, whether India's Ramsar sites are actually in this or not. What is the status of Chilika Lake as well as Keoladio National Park? All that we actually discussed over here. Okay, next we moved on to other kind of ecosystem like the coral reefs. We discussed about the concept of coral reefs and what is the concept of artificial corals, and then what are the deep sea corals and how are these deep sea corals different from that of their shallow water corals. What are the conducive conditions for the corals to actually grow, and what is the symbiotic association between these coral, that is the polyps exoskeleton, as well as the zooxanthellae algae. Okay, so this is what we discussed in the coral reefs, and finally we ended here with the mass coral bleaching, okay, mechanism, or the mass coral bleaching event that the organization has warned of, that they said that we are going to, or the world is going to face the fourth mass coral bleaching event. Okay, so this is what we discussed about under the ecosystems. Okay, now moving forward, we saw different environmental organization and bodies which are related to climate change. When it comes to India, we actually saw the 150th anniversary of the Indian Meteorological Department, because of which they came up with a climate framework which is on lines with the WMO, that is the World Meteorological Organization. Then we discussed about the NGT, that is the National Green Tribunal, its jurisdiction as well as power, functions, composition, etc. We also discussed about the Central Groundwater Board and its releasing of the 2024 or the annual report of groundwater and the status of contamination. So here we saw what are the contaminants as well as the associated diseases it causes. For example, presence of mercury causes minamata, presence of nitrate, it actually causes the blue baby syndrome, all those things we saw here. And then moving forward, we dealt with the international organization like the World Wildlife Fund for Nature, that is number one. And the second one was with respect to Global Environmental Facility, its funding mechanism to different conventions like the Minamata Convention, the Stockholm Convention, etc. So here we have actually completed the significant portion of ecosystem as well as the environmental organization and bodies. After which we actually moved to the third topic. So this is the second topic. So why am I telling all this? So that if you are a first timer, you will know how important is this course. So if you follow this very diligently, you will actually have most of the current affairs question coming up from this particular lecture. Do you understand? So totally the number of lectures will be 10 to 11, where we will cover 100 to 110 topics, including the species in news and also important articles from geography perspective, etc. Okay. Then we moved on to climate change, where first we started with the mitigation as well as adaptation. So under mitigation and adaptation, what all did we cover? We saw what are the different methods or the initiatives taken by different countries in order to mitigate the emission. Okay. Example, we discussed about the carbon border adjustment mechanism by the European Union, and we saw methods or the storage methods like the marine carbon dioxide removal. Okay, so what are the different methods? How do you actually alter or tweak the reflectivity of the earth? All that we actually discussed here. That is what we discussed in the geoengineering or the topic of climate engineering. And also we discussed this particular method of CCUS, that is carbon capture, utilization and storage. Okay, so all this we discussed in mitigation and adaptation. First of all, we looked at what was the difference between mitigation as well as adaptation. Okay, so these are all the different topics we studied under climate change mitigation. Then moving forward, we looked at various conferences as well as agreements and conventions which are important from our climate change perspective. So what are the various conventions that were important? We had the COP29 that took place at Baku of UNFCCC. So United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change. And what were the takeaway for India is what we discussed over here. Moving forward, we also spoke about the COP16 of what? The United Nations Convention to combat desertification. There we also looked at the World Drought Atlas and the key observations on what is the status of degradation in India. Also we discussed about Indian deforestation and what is the status of it, what are the initiatives taken by the Indian government in order to curb the same. So having discussed all this, we also discussed about what? We saw about Indian measures, certain measures, okay, towards this climate change. What were the measures? First one was actually the greenwashing guidelines that the CCPA has actually come up with. What is CCPA? Central Consumer Protection Authority. So we saw the topic or the concept of greenwashing, how it is actually used as a deceptive practice by the companies or the industries, and for that what are the guidelines that the government has actually put forward. This is what we discussed over here. And we also saw a similar topic, that is the eco-mark rules that the Ministry of Environment had actually come up with. We saw the Green Climate Fund. Okay, we discussed about the Green Climate Fund, and also we actually discussed about the Antarctic Treaty. So what is this particular treaty? How significant is this particular Antarctic region? And does India, how is India associated with this particular Antarctic region? Whether we had actually signed the Antarctic Treaty? Yes, we have in 1983, and we also have a consultative status. Okay, in 1983 we actually got it. And what are the research stations? The Maitri and the Bharati, which are actually located there, and what are the provisions of this Antarctic Treaty is what we discussed in yesterday's class. Okay, so this is what we have actually discussed over here. And also, after discussing these topics, we moved to the fourth topic, that is biodiversity. Okay, so let me occupy this space over here. So under biodiversity, we actually saw three important topics, that is one, the tiger reserves. So what are tiger reserves? What is the status of the conservation of tiger in India? We saw about the Project Tiger, which was actually launched by the Indian government in 1973. Whether it started in the Jim Corbett or which of the national park is what you need to say in the comment section if you're watching this video. And we also discussed about the recently added tiger reserve, that is Guru Ghasidas of Chhattisgarh, and what are the other tiger reserves is what we saw here. Moving forward, we discussed about the concept of biosphere reserves, which are internationally designated by the UNESCO. Okay, so we saw the biosphere reserves over here, and finally we discussed the concept of the eco-sensitive zones. Okay, so these were the concepts that we actually discussed over here, and what are eco-sensitive zones and how it actually lies outside or acts as a buffer in order to protect the biodiversity in the protected areas like the wildlife sanctuary as well as the biosphere reserves, etc. So with this, we had actually come and dealt with, or till we have come to this particular topic of biodiversity. Now moving forward, we actually have few more articles, that is what are all, or few more important topics, that is what was the convention in order to protect the biodiversity. So here we will be discussing about a number of topics more. So let me actually see how many of them have joined here, and then so that we can actually move forward with this particular session. Okay, so we can proceed with our session. So the topic that we are going to discuss today, there are number of topics, there are around 9 to 10 topics. Okay, so let me actually start writing. So the first topic that we will be discussing is the continuation of biodiversity. This is nothing but the COP16 on United Nations Convention of Biological Diversity. So UNCBD. So UNCBD, what was this particular convention? That is the COP16. What is this CO? What, first of all, what is this particular UNCBD? Okay, whether it is a binding agreement or not, when was it actually signed, when did India ratify it, and what are the key takeaways of COP16 for India? There are very, very important terms that are actually mentioned in this particular, because the takeaway of the meetings, that is how they become very, very significant. Okay, because any kind of, for example, in the Kyoto Protocol, what was actually the what to say end result, and for example under the Paris Agreement we had the nationally determined contributions, right? So they asked, nationally determined contributions actually belongs to, or it is relevant to which of the following statements. Okay, so you need to know what is the convention and what are the policies or the key terms that they actually come up with in every conference of parties meeting. Okay, so here we will be discussing about the United Nations Convention on Biological Diversity, the recent meeting on the Conference of Parties 16. Then moving forward, we will be discussing something called as the Kunming Montreal Biodiversity Framework or the protocol. Okay, so here we will see what is this Kunming Biodiversity Protocol. It was actually adopted in 2015. Okay, so I mean in the sorry, not adopted in 2015, it was in the COP, Conference of Parties 15. Okay, that was in Montreal, that took place in 2022, and it actually had set few targets. Okay, so what are the biodiversity targets over there, and what were the key plans that that is the biodiversity action plans that India has updated, all that we will see in line with the Kunming Montreal Protocol. Next one, we will be discussing about the International Big Cat Alliance. Okay, the International Big Cat Alliance, brought about in 2023 by the Indian government in order to commemorate the 50th anniversary of Project Tiger. So Project Tiger, we had actually come up in the year 1973. So to commemorate that, India has come up with this International Big Cat Alliance. We will be looking into what is this alliance, what is the funding mechanism, what are the 7 big cats that are protected over here. Of those 7 big cats which are present in India, all that we'll be discussing here. Now, moving forward, there is another topic on the tiger conservation itself that actually talks about the Tiger Conservation Coalition. So, Tiger Conservation Coalition. So here different NGOs have actually come together and they wanted to conserve this particular big cat. Okay. So this is what is a Tiger Conservation Coalition. And moving forward, we will deal with this particular CITES, that is Convention on International Trade of Endangered Species of Flora and Fauna. So this is what we'll be discussing. We'll be talking about different indices which are giving the protection status to different species, that is the appendix 1, appendix 2 as well as 3. What is the percentage of conservation or the protection that these species are given under CITES, what is the association with India as well as CITES, all that we'll be discussing in this particular article, of this topic. The next topic we'll be dealing with, that is the last topic under biodiversity, will be integrated development. Integrated development of wildlife habitat. So this is nothing but it is an umbrella centrally sponsored scheme which was brought by the government in 2008 in order to protect the wildlife. So this actually encompasses or encapsulates different schemes, like you have the Project Tiger, we have the Project Dolphin as well as Project Elephant. However, elephant and tiger are put together now. So these are the different projects. Okay. So with this we will be completing the particular topic of biodiversity. Okay. So after biodiversity, we will be moving on to the concept of pollution, which is very important specifically for your mains examination, and the schemes or the initiatives with respect to pollution can be asked in your prelims examination. Okay. So here we will be dealing with the concept of pollution. So of course there are different kinds of pollution, right? So the major pollution is air pollution. Next one, whatever we know, is the water pollution. Okay. And then there is another pollution called as the soil pollution. And there are other kinds of pollution also. What are other kinds of pollution? It can be, what to say, the nitrate pollution. And then it can be, the methane pollution. There is also light pollution. Okay, so these are the different kinds of pollution. So now in today's class we will be discussing the first type of pollution, that is air pollution. So under air pollution we have 3 initiatives that we have taken up, or the 3 concepts. First one is air of Anthropocene initiative. Okay, where all the scientists and the research community actually came together. They amalgamated science plus art in order to show or depict the amount of pollution that actually India as well as other countries face. Okay, so this is air of Anthropocene initiative. The second one is the NCAP program, that is the National Clean Air Program. So we will see what is this National Clean Air Program. Did India launch it or not? And what are the categorization of cities under the National Green Air Program? Whether the cities actually comply with the NAAQS, that is the National Ambient Air Quality Standards. All that we will be discussing in this particular article. Then the last article for today will be the ground level ozone. So ground level ozone, or it is also called as the tropospheric ozone. So we will see what is this ozone. Usually we would have heard, right, this ozone is a gas that is actually present only in the stratosphere. This is what we would have heard, right? Yes, that is true. Ozone can be present in 2 different layers of the atmosphere. One is that it can be present in the stratosphere. There it actually protects the life on earth from the incoming ultraviolet radiation. Okay, but there is another kind of very very harmful ozone which is actually present in the troposphere, which is about 10 kilometers from the ground, and that is a very very powerful and a potent greenhouse gas. Okay, it is so many times, what to say, it is actually almost 28 to 30 times more potent in absorbing or keeping the heat when compared to that of carbon dioxide. So we will see what is this ground level ozone, what are the health impacts because of this ozone, all that we will be discussing over here. Okay, so these are the topics. So yes, so now let us actually move forward in getting into the topics. Okay, so let us move forward. Yeah, so here we will start with our very first topic, very very important and the most important topic. Okay, so the 16th edition of the Conference of Parties recently actually took place, okay, to the Convention on Biological Diversity. So already remember we have discussed about COP29 of UNFCCC, and now yesterday we discussed about COP16 of what? UNCCD. Now we will be discussing about COP16 of UNCBD. All these three are the Rio Conventions. Okay, Rio Conventions, or the which came or which was actually born out of the Rio Earth Summit that took place in 1992. Okay, so this is what it is. So recently this has actually what to say, this meeting had happened, and India had recently launched an updated biological or updated biodiversity strategy and action plan. Okay, so all the countries are actually supposed to come up with their biological diversity action plan, and that will be looked at by the outlook. Okay, so they will be assessed on to what extent they have actually conserved the biodiversity. Okay, so that is what India has also come up with, and this is in line with that of the Kunming Montreal Global Biodiversity Framework. This will be our next topic. However, I would like to give you an introduction of this particular Kunming Montreal Global Biodiversity Framework. In order to protect the biodiversity, this particular Kunming Montreal Global Biodiversity Framework actually was launched, or it was adopted in the Conference of Parties 15 that took place in the year 2022 in Montreal, that is Canada. Okay, so that is why it is called as Kunming Montreal. So this actually was in Canada. Okay, do you understand this one? Here, the aim of this particular, actually this was adopted because of the failure of the previous biodiversity targets. What was the previous biodiversity target? Was the strategic framework, one target was there, and the next one was on the Aichi targets. So here we discussed, right, what are Aichi targets? These are a set of 20 targets, which were divided into 5 goals. Okay, and which was supposed to be achieved by the year 2020. So this was actually the Aichi targets. It had to be, what to say, it had to be implemented and had to be achieved by 2020, but this particular Aichi targets failed. Okay, so that is why in order to replace this unsuccessful Aichi targets, there came a Kunming Global Biodiversity Framework. Okay, so the aim or the objective was of this particular framework was to restore and conserve 30% of the ecosystem, whether it is the land ecosystem or whether it is the marine or the coastal ecosystem, and this has to be done by the year 2030, and also we have to live in harmony with that of nature by 2050. This was the objective of this particular Kunming Global Biodiversity Framework. Okay, however, it had few other objectives or the targets. So the targets of this one was called as the 30 cross 30 targets. So let's see few of the targets. What was the target? Number one is that you have to protect, okay, you have to protect 30% of the ecosystem, whether it is the land or the ocean ecosystem, by the year 2030. This was the first target. The second target was In case any of the coastal, that is the marine ecosystem or the land ecosystem, have actually degraded, what you have to restore them. So restore again 30% of the land as well as the marine ecosystem. Okay. Then number 3 is, in case if you are actually giving out any kind of subsidies, okay, subsidies for activities like agriculture, or in case agriculture, if you're giving subsidies, then what happens, farmers can use pesticides, insecticides, etc., or any kind of unsustainable practices can be followed there. Okay, there will be unsustainable use of electricity, such as one that happened during the green revolution which took place in India. So if you're giving out subsidies for agriculture, or if you're giving out for fisheries as well as the fossil fuels, then what you need to do, you have to cut that down by 50%. This is what it actually told. Okay, so subsidies have to be, sorry, it should not be cut by 50%, it shall be less than $500 billion overall. Okay, this is what it said. Next one, in case there are or there is a presence of pesticides as well as nutrient rich environment, which sometimes results in the eutrophication, algal bloom, etc., then you have to reduce such pesticides and nutrient richness by 50%. So this was another target of this conveying protocol. And the next one, it spoke about how sustainably you have to use the ecosystems for agriculture, fisheries, as well as other activities and processes, and whatever are the services that actually come out of these particular ecosystems, they have to be equitably shared. The benefits of it should be equitably shared. Okay, so this is the next one. And then they said that you have to half or reduce the amount of the invasive alien species that is actually brought into the environment or the ecosystem, that is going to threaten the other native species. And finally, it said all the businesses have to give a report on the impact that they bring on the biodiversity. So these were the 7 major targets that were actually brought by the Kunming Biodiversity Protocol of 2022. So to do all this, there has to be a funding mechanism, isn't it? So they said that you have to pool the funds to around $200 billion from the governments of different countries, from the corporates, the private, as well as all the other stakeholders, in order to bring about or take care of fund the biodiversity initiatives, of which 20 billion should be the target that has to be coming from the developed countries by 2025, and by 2030 it has to increase to $30 billion. Okay, so these are the funding mechanisms. And they also actually said that please establish a global biodiversity fund under the global environmental facility. Already this global environmental facility is actually funding UNCBD, right? So that is what, please establish the GBF under GEF is what they told. Okay, so these are the objectives or the targets, the 30 by 30 targets that were set by the Kunming Protocol, and this is the funding mechanism. Do you understand? And in this only, in line with this, India recently updated the National Biodiversity Strategy and Action Plan, which is the NBSAP. Do you understand? Now, let us move quickly. Let us now discuss what do you mean by this particular. Somebody is asking me, at the end of all the classes, can you please post the marathon session? What do you mean by marathon session? Please explain. Some Krishna, I think. Please explain what is marathon session. So now let's quickly get into the UN Convention on Biological Diversity. Okay. So if you see, this is actually a multilateral treaty, that is different countries are parties to it under the United Nations Environment Program. If this is not visible, let me zoom it for you guys. Yeah. So it is a multilateral treaty under the UNEP. Again, very important fact, that is the United Nations Environment Program, and this was opened up for signature in the Rio Earth Summit in 1992 and entered into force in the year 1993. There were certain goals of this, of course, to take care of the biological diversity, then sustainably use the biodiversity, and whatever benefits are there, equitably share those benefits. Okay. The headquarters, Montreal, Canada. Then members, 196 members are there. When did India ratify it? India has ratified it in 1994. And according, ratification means what? When you ratify a particular international convention, that means in lines with that you have to bring about a national framework in order to what to say, implement the policies or the key provisions of that international convention. So in light to that only, India actually enacted the Biological Diversity Act of 2002 for giving effect to the provisions of CBD. Then the United States of America has not ratified it. Okay, US actually will be historical polluters. They are very selfish people who want to cause all the harm to the society, but they will not be in any of the conventions. Chalo, let's see. Next one, the supplementary agreements. What are the supplementary agreements under this? There are two agreements. One is the Cartagena Protocol. Next one is the Nagoya Protocol. What do you mean by the Cartagena Protocol is that if you are bringing any kind of change to the biodiversity, for example, if you're doing genetic modification and you're introducing a new kind of species, then it should not cause any kind of harm. So in order to prevent the harm that these genetically modified organisms can cause on the have on the biodiversity, you have to have a protocol that will regulate it, and this came in the year 2000 and this was called as the Cartagena Protocol. Okay. The next one is the Nagoya Protocol 10 years later. Okay. So in 2010 it was actually adopted, and they said in case if you have a successful model like the BT cotton, which is actually highly resistant, then the benefits of it actually has to be shared with everybody on an equitable basis, and this was called as the Nagoya Protocol. And Nagoya Protocol is the protocol which actually gave birth to this Aichi targets. Okay, so Aichi targets is an outcome of this Nagoya Protocol. So this is what is about the UNCCD. Okay, sorry, UNCBD. Now moving forward, let us see in the current meeting COP19, what are all the key takeaways? Please pay attention to this class. It becomes very, very important. Okay. So yeah, what does it say? Operationalization of the Kali Fund. Okay. So what do you mean by this Kali Fund? This was actually established in order to ensure fair and equitable sharing. Kali is nothing but it is a place in Colombia. Okay, so this was actually established in order to share what sharing of benefits from the digital sequence information. This is nothing but any kind of information you have digitally with respect to the genetic modifications, like if you have digital information on the DNA, the RNA, etc., then you'll have to equitably share that. Okay, so this is called as digital sequence information, and at least 50% of the fund will focus on self-identified needs of who? The indigenous people as well as the local communities, particularly with emphasis on women as well as youth. Very, very important. Kali Fund, operationalization of the Kali Fund with respect to COP16 takeaway. Okay. Next one. Permanent subsidiary body has to be established on Article 8J. So there was a permanent subsidiary body that actually was there in, it was actually established on Article 8J. What is this 8J? This basically talks about the preservation or the maintenance of the knowledge and innovations and practices of the indigenous people. A lot of emphasis has been given on indigenous people this time. Okay, so indigenous people, and there is also a new program on work on indigenous people and local communities. Okay, so this talks about the tasks. What are the tasks where they have to be involved in biodiversity conservation and benefit sharing? This is what the key takeaway is. The next takeaway is resource mobilization strategy. Okay, so there is a strategy for resource mobilization. In order to secure, I already told you there has to be $2 billion which you have to pool from the, the community, that is the stakeholders like the government, the private, etc. for the 2000 by 2030 for the biodiversity efforts. And also we have the Conving Biodiversity Fund. This is actually launched with, this was launched with what? The initial contribution of USD 200 million from China. And also you have to reduce the use of what to say, in case you're giving subsidies for different activities like agriculture, then fossil fuels, energy, etc., you have to cut it down by 500 billion per year. This is what the resource mobilization strategy under Conving protocol had said. Okay, sorry, under COP 16 was the takeaway. Okay, next one, national biodiversity has to be there. So among national biodiversity targets, among all the 196 countries, every country, that is around 119 country, see, basically every country has to come up with their biodiversity action plans. But out of the 196, in the current one, in the current COP 16, 119 submitted the targets, okay? And 44 countries submitted the national biodiversity strategy and action plan. And India is also the one which updated over here. So, this is what it is. Now, moving forward, there is something called as synthetic biology. So, synthetic biology, sometimes seen in news, is actually related to which of the following? That can also be a question. So, synthetic biology is nothing but making use of the engineering techniques. Okay. So, engineering technology or techniques in order to produce new organisms or in order to alter the already existing organisms. And this can be done by different processes like the genetic modification, then the DNA sequencing, genome editing, etc. So this is the concept of synthetic biology. Here they said that there was an introduction of thematic action plan in order to address this particular synthetic biology, so that there has to be a balance between the ethical and environmental aspects of the field, and it focuses on capacity building, of course technology transfer as well as knowledge sharing. Okay, next, management of invasive alien species. So new guidelines have actually been brought about for managing the invasive alien species. Okay, so although there are although there are actually enhanced databases and regulations, cross border regulations, etc., there was this new guidelines that was actually brought about. Okay, now moving forward, let us see what is the concept of invasive alien species. So this is one such example. Okay, so this is called as lantana camera. Okay, so this is actually an invasive alien species. This was brought into India from tropical America in the 1950s as an ornamental plant only. But then what happened? It was actually introduced into the ecosystem and it started growing or occupying 40% of a particular ecosystem, for example, in Western Ghats. Okay, so what are the challenges that these invasive alien species actually pose is that first, they alter the chemical composition of the soil. Okay, chemical composition is altered. The second one, there is no space or no room for the native plants to survive. Then this is not the forage, or it actually acts as an improper forage, that is the plants on which the animals, that is the herbivores, actually feed on. And also it has an increased capacity to cause wildfires. So these are the negative characteristics or the impact that these invasive alien species can cause. Okay, so this is what is invasive alien species, and the Conving protocol, what did they say? Please halve the amount of invasive alien species, or reduce them by 50% from being introduced into the ecosystem. The next one, ecologically or biologically significant marine areas. So this particular meeting actually emphasized or endorsed, okay, in an updated process for identifying and protecting these particular or the significant marine protected areas. Okay, so this actually concept was established in the year 2010. Okay, in order to identify the vital as well as the vulnerable marine areas and what is the necessity for us to conserve the same. Next one, global action plan on biodiversity and health. So here, this particular meeting actually focused on addressing the interconnectedness between the health of the ecosystem, the animals and humans under, that is, bring the health and the well-being of the ecosystem, the animals, that is the wildlife, as well as the humans under one, that is the one health approach. This is what they said. And the plan also aims to prevent any kind of zoonotic diseases, okay, the diseases that are transferred from the animals, and also to reduce the NCDs, that is the non-communicable diseases, and promote the sustainability. Already we know there are a lot of NCDs like the health problems, the strokes, the diabetes, etc. Okay, so all these are NCDs, and very sadly India is also called as the diabetes capital of the world. Now recently we actually had a research that found out that there is also type 5 diabetes. Okay, so here we need to focus on improving the sustainability and bring everything or integrate them into one health approach is what the COP16 actually called for. Next one, risk assessment for living modified organisms. We know that, right? So there are voluntary guidelines. So under the Cartagena protocol, we actually saw these are the voluntary guidelines for assessing the risks which are associated with the genetically modified organisms, or which are also called as the LMOs, okay, living modified organisms. And now a new framework was brought in order to face the challenges that are posed by the LMOs. The next one, recognition of the role of people of African descent. You can ask me why the COP is telling that take descent from the people of African, descent, take the ascent of people who are in the African descent. Anybody who can actually tell me? Okay, let me put forth to you. They said focus on the people of African descent is that people over here, despite living in regions of high biodiversity richness, what happens? They had always been subjected to some kind of exploitation. For example, there was colonial exploitation of these people, right? And also there was a dispossession of land. Okay, so their lands were taken away. There was a lot of slavery, or you can say rehabilitation of these people. So now it should no longer sustain. So you need to involve them also in your decision making is what they said. So role of people of African descent. Okay. Now we will see on what are all the updated India's national biodiversity strategy on action plan. So far we discussed about that COP16 had actually taken place. This was to be in line with the Kunming Montreal Protocol. We discussed about this being adopted in COP15. Okay, and now we will see in line with this what are all the biodiversity targets India has actually set. It said that there are 123, there are 23 national biodiversity targets. Okay, so where it actually spanned around different dimensions. First one is conservation areas. 30% of the land has to be conserved and 50% of the alien species have to be reduced, and there has to be what they say, sustainable consumption. Okay, so sustainable consumption options actually have to be given there. Next one, there has to be reduction in the pollution. So what they said is you have to commit, that is India will commit in order to reduce the menace of pollution with specific goals, okay, by reducing the pesticides intake, etc. Next one, financial commitment. For this, India has actually allocated a fund of around 81,664 crores from the period of 2025 to 2030. Then there also has to be community engagement. Okay, so including the people who are dependent on the forest, people like the lawmakers, the government, private sector, etc. have to be here. Now moving forward, let us see the second topic. So we finished the most important topic, that is the first topic of COP16. Okay, now let us actually move forward to the second topic. Let's do that quickly. Let me have some water. Yeah. So let us start with the second topic, that is the Conving Montreal Global Biodiversity Framework. This is something that we already know, right? So this marked its first anniversary in 2023 because it came into existence in 2022, Montreal, Canada, COP15 we discussed. Next one, about it I told you, COP15 UNCBD 2022, Montreal, Canada. So this actually became a replacement to the strategic plan for biodiversity 2011 to 2020 and also the Aichi target set of 20 targets divided into 5 goals that had to be achieved by 2020. The aim was to halt and to reverse the biodiversity loss by 2030, okay, and it is legally non-binding, very important, and it also set goals for the 2050, okay. So what are the goals that it had? First of all, there has to be, or you have to halt the human induced species extinction. So basically focuses on what to say, conservation of biodiversity, right? The next one, sustainable use of biodiversity, and what are all the services you get from that. There has to be equitable sharing of the benefits, and closing the biodiversity finance gap of 700 billion per year. Because countries, whenever they meet, no, earlier they will actually come up, you know, in the inception phase they'll be all excited, they will come up with a huge target of funding this biodiversity initiatives by giving 700 billion dollars, but then there have been what to say, lags and gaps, okay. So they said you have to close this finance gap. So this is what it came up with. Next one, the targets for 2030, already we saw that, right? 30 by 30 target, protect 30% of the planet for nature. Then there has to be conservation of 30% of land, sea, as well as the inland waters, and restoration, there has to be 30% restoration of degraded ecosystem. Pesticides have to be reduced at least by 50% by 2030, and any kind of nutrients, that is reduce the nutrients lost to the environment by at least 50% by 2030. Finally, introduction of invasive alien species should also be by half, or 50% reduction by 2030. So these were the targets. It was quick, right? Next one is International Big Cat Alliance. Okay, so yesterday itself, so what are big cats? These actually include 7 major species, okay, which belong to the big cat family. So big cat family. So what are the 7 species that belong to the big cat family? First one, lion. Next is tiger. Okay, next you have the leopard. Then you have the snow leopard. Then we have the cheetahs. Then we have the jaguar, and the 7th species is your puma. So of these 7 big cats, except for the last 2, that is jaguar and puma, these 5 big cats are actually found in India. Okay. So recently, India has officially joined the International Big Cat Alliance. So this is actually the major international initiative that has been launched by India in the year 2023 in order to commemorate the 50th anniversary of what? The 1973 Project Tiger. Okay, so that is why it has come up with this. Okay, so now let us see what is this International Big Cat Alliance. So these are the big cats I told you: leopard, cheetah, lion, tiger. All these things are important. These are the big cats. So it is a global alliance launched by India 2023 in order to protect the 7 major big cats: lion, tiger, leopard, snow leopard, cheetah, jaguar and puma, and 5 of these except for the puma and jaguar are found in India. Okay, so this is the International Big Cat Alliance. Now moving forward, let us see what are the objectives of the ICBA. Okay, so let me zoom it for you guys. So first, there has to be, it is open, na? It is open for the countries to come and join. Okay, so that is why here what are they saying? Mutual cooperation should be there among different countries, okay, for conservation of the big cats. And we need to arrest the decline in the big cat population and reverse the trend, okay, because India tops the tiger population when compared to that of the rest of the world, okay. So we need to preserve it, and in case if you have lost it, then you have to restore it. That's what they are saying. And then you have to arrive at a central platform which will actually be a central repository of successful practices. The next one, there has to be multi-pronged approach. Okay, so there has to be an approach which includes capacity building, sharing of knowledge, networking, research, etc. So these are the different objectives of the International Big Cat Alliance. Okay, now let's move forward. Let's see the membership. So it is actually open to around 100 countries, to be very specific, 97 range countries which actually contain the natural habitat of these 7 big cats, or those who are interested to join. Okay, so this is the membership is divided like that, and so far there are 4 countries which actually joined this International Big Cat Alliance, and one includes India. So the other one is Nicaragua, Eswatini is in Africa. Next is Somalia. These are African countries which have joined. Next one, the outlay and the time period is rupees 150 crores. That is first 5 years, 2023 to 2028. So first 5 years, it will actually be, this program will be sustained by rupees 150 crore that has been given by the Indian government. Later on, the sustenance of this particular program depends upon the international funds that all these countries collaboratively put together. Okay. Next one, the governance. What is going to be the governance structure? First of all, there's going to be assembly of members. There will be a standing committee for it. There will be a secretariat where decisions are taken, and everything will be headquartered in India. The statute will be finalized by an institutional international steering committee. Okay, so this again will be constituted, and this will be constituted with whom? By the nominated national focal points of founding member countries. Okay, so very important. It actually has a steering committee, and here the steering committee will be constituted with nominated members from across the globe. So this is what is the International Big Cat Alliance composition and functions. This is what I told you, right? First 5 years supported by India's total grant assistance of 100 million. After that, it will depend upon the fee as well as the contribution from other countries. And here it also contributes, that is, bringing about such an initiative contributes to the sustainable development. Okay, we definitely know about SDG 15. Okay, commitment to protect the life on land. So this alliance actually ensures that there is sustainable use of natural resources, and also takes care of the challenges that comes from climate change, especially for these big cats. Okay. Next one, it safeguards the big cats as well as their habitats. So by this, it contributes to what? The natural adaptation, that is the climate change adaptation, water and food security, and well-being of thousands of what to say, communities which are reliant on these particular ecosystems. Okay, so this is what is the International Big Cat Alliance. So see here, International Big Cat Alliance. If you can't see it properly, let me zoom it for you guys. Okay, can you see? International Big Cat Alliance, multi-country and multi-coalition agency at conserving the big cat species. There are 7 big cats in India. You can actually see them: lion, cheetah, and then you have the leopard, the snow leopard, the puma, jaguar, etc. Launched by India 2023, headquartered in India, 96 members, and currently what? There are 4 people who are part of this alliance. Structure: assembly of members, there will be a standing committee and a secretariat. Functions, I told you: secure the future of the big cats and also prevent them from the adverse impact of climate change, and bring about different kind of policy initiatives, and also help in achieving the SDG. So these are all the targets. So what are the threats that these big cats usually face? So definitely we know, right? They face the threat of poaching when they are poached for their skin. Next, it will be for their flesh. Okay, and they will be exported. That is why we have conventions like the CITES as well as the traffic. Okay, so trade related analysis of flora and fauna in international commerce. Okay, so this is what it is. Then it also faces habitat fragmentation. So because of recently, you can see a lot of instances of human wildlife conflict, right, where the animals are moving into the lands. So people say they are moving into our habitats, but no, we have encroached their habitat. That is why they are, coming out. So this is the reason. So this is habitat fragmentation is the second one. Next one, there is human wildlife conflict, as I told you, and as such by deforestation as well as climate change. All these are human induced only primarily. So this is what is your International Big Cat Alliance. Now moving forward, we will see what is the conservation status of these big cats. Very, 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 very important. Okay, it can come in the examination, so please pay attention. So the first one is tiger. It is also called as the Panthera tigris. This is the scientific name, and it is endangered. Okay, tiger. If you meet a tiger, your life comes to an end. Think like that. So tiger, Panthera tigris, endangered. Okay, and predominantly all the species except for the puma are under appendix 1 of CITES. Remember like that, except puma, all the big cats appendix 1 of CITES. And if you see the conservation status under the Indian Wildlife Protection Act, WPA of 1972, all of them are schedule 1 except for 2. Okay, this is not identified. So all are schedule 1, not schedule 2. Did I say schedule 2? All are schedule 1. Okay, so if you take the tiger, it's schedule 1, lion schedule 1, again leopards, then snow leopards, everything is under schedule 1 except for puma and jaguar. Here we do not know, right, because these are not present in India also, so think like that. Okay, so we don't know. Others are all schedule 1. Next, all are appendix what? Appendix 1 except for the puma, that is appendix 2. Remember like that. Okay, you got a puma shoe, 2 in number. So puma alone, appendix 2. So remember like this. So the others we will actually see what is the IUCN status. First one we saw Panthera tigris, which is endangered, because when you meet a tiger, your life is it's ended. Okay, so it is endangered. Next is lion and leopards. Lion, Panthera, Leo. Easy, isn't it? Isn't it? Yeah, so Leo, it is vulnerable. Next is leopards. This is Panthera pardus. This is also vulnerable. Then you have snow leopards, that is Panthera antia. This is also vulnerable. Then you have the puma and the jaguar. Your puma is Puma concolor. It is called as Puma concolor, least concerned, and Panthera onca, that is the jaguar, it is near threatened. And finally, the cheetahs, you have the Asionyx jubatus. This is also vulnerable. See, scientific name, whether it's important or not, it's fine. But then you should know about the IUCN, the site status, as well as the conservation under WPA. Okay, so this is what it is. Okay, so remember all the 5 which are actually present in India. This is what? Tiger, lion. So tiger, lion, leopards, snow leopards. Then you have the what? Cheetahs. Okay, so except for the tiger, all are vulnerable. Okay, and here all the species that are actually found in India are under appendix 1. All vulnerable, all appendix 1, and if you see, all are under schedule 1 also. So this is what. Now what are the other programs that the Indian government has actually brought forward in order to preserve these big cats? Is that, of course, we have the Project Tiger. So this was the first project that actually came in the year 1973. Next one, we have the Asiatic Lion Reintroduction Project. Asiatic Lion Reintroduction Project. This came in the year 2004. And then moving forward, we also have Project Cheetah, and we have the Project Snow Leopard and all, which was actually brought about. Okay, so this is about the International Big Cat Alliance. Next, we'll move on to the fourth topic, that is the Tiger Conservation Coalition. So this is again, aimed at conserving the tiger population. That is why yesterday itself we discussed about how important are the tigers and what are the total number of tiger reserves in India. Okay, so we actually saw the recent one that has been added in Chhattisgarh. This is nothing but the Guru Ghasidas. Okay, apart from that, we have different tiger reserves like what? Achankamar, we have Udanti Sittanadi, we have Indravati in Chhattisgarh. We also saw about different other tiger reserves in other states in India. So all that you have to know. So here there was this Sustainable Finance for Tiger Landscape Conference that was held in Bhutan. Okay, and the Tiger Coalition. So the Tiger Conservation Coalition committed to raising around $1 billion for the tiger conservation. Okay. So all this is not very important. You just have to know what is this Tiger Conservation Coalition. Okay. Let's see. It is a coalition of 8 NGOs, okay, which aims at conserving the wild tiger population and their habitats. So this actually has the organization, that is NGO, like the EIA, that stands for the Environmental Investigation Agency. Next one, you have the Flora and Fauna, International Union for Conservation of Nature. Then we have the NGO Panthera. Then we have Traffic, which actually talks about the trade related assessment of your flora and fauna in the commerce or international commerce. And then you have UNDP, that is United Nations Development Program. Then you have the Wildlife Conservation Society, and finally the World Wildlife Fund for Nature. All of them came together. So this is the coalition of tiger conservation, and they came together in order to protect this particular big cat. Okay. So now let us move forward and see the status of conservation of tigers in India. So India has successfully, in the year 2023, has actually completed the 50 years of this project Tiger. Okay. So this particular project Tiger, which started in the Corbett National Park. Okay. So over here, you should also know which is the largest tiger reserve. Do you know which is the largest tiger reserve in India? Please answer in the comment section which is the largest tiger reserve in India. And also, if you see the tiger reserves in India, they actually encompass, or they are spread over 75,000 square kilometers, and India is actually home to more than 3,000 tigers in the total 59 tiger reserves. Okay, and also we actually account for 70% of the tiger population when compared to that of the world. Okay, then if you actually see which is the largest, we can say it is the Nagarjuna Sagar Sri Sailam Tiger Reserve. So this is the largest. Do you understand? And the next one, what we had to say, there's nothing but much to discuss about this one. You have this particular map which actually depicts different tiger reserves in India. Let us actually zoom it and see what are all the different tiger reserves in India. So if you see over here, let's start from the south. Okay, so let us actually start from the south. Yes, we have Telangana, we have the Amrabad. Okay, and then in Kerala we have the Parambikulam Tiger Reserve as well as the Periyar Tiger Reserve. And then if you see Tamil Nadu, it actually has the Satyamangalam, then the Anaimalai, then you have the Mudumalai Tiger Reserves, which is actually present here. And then moving on, if you see Karnataka, we have the Nagarhole, we have the Bandipur. Okay, all these things we have in Karnataka. And then if you actually look at Andhra Pradesh, let's say this is Nagarjuna Sagar Sri Sailam, this is actually the biggest. And then if you see towards the west, let us actually see, or towards the east, which one you want. Let's see towards the west. You have the Rajasthan, where you have the Ranthambore as well as the Sariska, which is present over here, and Ramgarh is also present here. And then if you see Uttarakhand, you have the Corbett as well as the Rajaji Tiger Reserve. Then if you see Jharkhand, you have the Palamu. In the Mizoram towards the east, you have the Dampa. And then other things like Odisha, this actually hosts the second largest tiger reserve, which is the Simlipal Tiger Reserve. And along with Simlipal, it also has the Satkosia Tiger Reserve. Then you have Bihar, where you have the Valmiki Tiger Reserve, and then you have the Manas, the Kaziranga, as well as the Orang in Assam. So these are all the tiger reserves in India. Okay. So now let's actually move forward. Let's see about the fifth topic, that is CITES. Okay. So CITES is nothing but the convention on the, wait, let me write. It is the convention on international trade of endangered species, okay, of flora and fauna. Do you understand? Flora, fauna. So this is what is called as CITES. Okay, Let us see. CITES recently has actually come up with the global picture report. And what does this picture actually talk about? The status of international trade of the endangered species, whether it is the animals or it is the flora, that is the vegetation. And also we will look at the conservation statuses, that is the appendices. Okay, so appendix 1, what is the percentage of conservation of species? It conserves 3% of the total species. Okay, so the total species that is actually conserved under CITES is around 36,000 species. Okay, this species includes both flora and fauna. Among that, 3% is conserved under appendix 1, which are nearly, extremely threatened, or they are going to go extinct. Next one is the appendix 2, where this actually has around appendix 2 around 97% of the species, that is around 97% of the 36,000. And the next one is appendix 3, which actually hosts around 1%. So now let us get into the details of this particular CITES. CITES is nothing but it is an international agreement, and that is between the governments. Okay, various governments come together and ensure that there is that the international trade that occurs with respect to the flora and the fauna, this actually should not threaten their survival. That is basically they are trying to say the trade has to be sustainable. So this is why all the countries actually come together. And the CITES was what? It was drafted as a result of the resolution that was adopted in the year 1963. And here there was a meeting among the members of IUCN, that is the World Conservation Union. Not very important. And if you if you say this actually came out almost in 1963, and then the text of the convention was finally agreed in Washington around 1973, and it finally came into force in the year 1975. So there has actually been conservation effort for this international trade since the 1950s itself. Then there was the text that had to be developed, then there has to be consensus of the member countries, etc., and there had to be some resolution that actually had to be taken up. So all that took some time, and finally this CITES came into force in the year 1975. The headquarters, actually it is hosted by the UNEP, okay, that is the United Nations Environment Program, and it is located in Switzerland. How many parties are there? 184 parties are here. Is India party to CITES? Yes, India is there to the convention. All these 184 members can actually meet, they can actually bring about the proposals, and they also have the right to vote in the meetings of the CITES. What is the nature of this convention? It is legally binding. Very, very important. Legally binding. Kunming Protocol, was that legally binding? No, it wasn't, right? So you need to know which are legally binding, which are not legally binding. So this is legally binding. CITES legally binding, okay? But it does not take the place of the national laws. What does that mean? See, this is just a convention that is giving you a framework on how the countries have to bring about the national policies in line with the international trade of endangered species of flora and fauna. Okay, so basically that is why it is legally binding, of course, but then it does not take the place of what? Your national laws. So how does it work? The species which are covered are listed under 3 appendices. Let's see what is the conservation status. Okay, so if I have to zoom it for you guys, the different degrees of protection are actually provided here, and it includes almost, if you're not able to see it still, I will just tell it to you. Okay, so it covers 3,600 species, okay, of both animals and plants, and there are 3 appendices, okay, in which these 36,000 animals and plants are being conserved. So 3% of this entire 36,000 are actually placed in appendix 1, where these species of plants and animals are threatened by extinction. So this is placed over here, and hence international, the trade of these particular animal or the plant species are totally prohibited. Okay, so international commercial trade is prohibited. Okay, next, 97% of this particular 36,000 species are kept under appendix 2. So these are not actually threatened, but they are on the verge of being threatened, or they are capable of being threatened. Okay, so they are actually kept over here. Here also, if you see, the international commercial trade is allowed or not, here totally prohibited in appendix 1. Okay, which includes 15% of animal species as well as 85% of plant species. Here, where 97% of the 36,000 are protected, what happens here? International trade is allowed, but it is regulated. Very, very important. So there is only here totally there is prohibition. Here there is controlled trade, international commercial trade. The next 1% of the species are conserved under appendix 3. Okay, so here the species which are subjected to regulation within the jurisdiction are actually controlled over here. Here also the what is international trade is controlled only. So this is what they are saying. Okay, so these are the conservation statuses which is present under the CITES. Let us now see what is the relation India actually has with that of CITES. Okay, so who will be the authority who will be representing India in CITES is that the Director of Wildlife Preservation is designated as the management authority for the CITES in India. However, apart from that, there are also 5 other scientific authorities who are there, who actually assist with different aspects of CITES. Okay, who are they? Let's see. The Botanical Survey of India, the Zoological Survey of India, then there is Central Marine Fisheries Institution, that is the CMFRI, and then there is this WWI, Wildlife Institute of India, and finally the Institute of Forest Genetics and Tree Breeding. Very, very important, present in Coimbatore. Okay, presence is also important. Zoological Survey of India, Kolkata. Remember, Kolkata, West Bengal, Sundarbans, mangroves, Gangetic, I mean the dolphins are there, and then lot of the Bengal tiger are there. So it is actually the zoological survey is present in what? In Kolkata. Next one, botanical survey. That is also present in Kolkata. Again, Sundarban, mangroves, etc. So the Kolkata or the Bengal region is actually very, very rich in biodiversity. So zoological survey and the Botanical Survey of India, it's present there only. Then fisheries is present in Cochin. Okay. Then the next one, Wildlife Institute in Dehradun. Don't confuse with Zoological Survey. Wildlife Institute in Dehradun and Institute of Forest. This is present in Coimbatore. Forest genetics as well as breeding. Okay. So this is what it is. Next, if you see the status of international trade in all the species or in the international trade in all wildlife species of India, including the species which are covered under CITES in particular. All these are regulated by which of the legal frameworks? One, in India, how it is actually regulated? It is by the WPA, that is Wildlife Protection Act of 1982. Excuse me, sorry, 1972. The next one is the EXIM policy, that is the Export Import Policy under the Foreign Trade Regulation Act of 1992. And the final thing is Customs Act. Why customs and exports imports are involved here? Because it's basically convention on international trade, right? So that is why under all these acts it is regulated. Okay, so this is what is about CITES. Now let's move to integrated development or wildlife habitats. Let's see whether is anybody asking any questions, or if there are any doubts, please do ask. Okay, so let us actually move forward and continue with our session. This is integrated development of wildlife. Okay, so if you see, there is integration in the development of wildlife habitat. Okay, so specifically there were projects that actually dealt with the species of tiger. Then there were projects that actually dealt with these elephants, and then there were projects with respect to that of dolphins. Okay, so what the government thought, why separate projects for each of the species? Let us actually do an integrated development of all the species, right? So that is where you will be having all these components under one umbrella scheme. That is when the government came up with a centrally sponsored scheme in the year 2008, and such scheme was this integrated development of wildlife habitat, which is dependent on the devolution, of course, of the funds of the Finance Commission. Okay, so why am I talking about Finance Commission? Because the context over here has Finance Commission, don't be confused. Okay, so the Union Cabinet recently approved the continuation of the Integrated Development of Wildlife Habitat Scheme that came up in 2008 for the 15th Finance Commission cycle. So, for this next few years also, for the next cycle till which the finance commissions are there, according to the recommendations, there will be devolution of finances for these centrally sponsored schemes. Okay, so this is what is the international or integrated development of wildlife habitat scheme. Of course, centrally sponsored scheme under Ministry of Environment, Forest and Climate Change 2008, and it actually, the main objective or the aim is to develop or to conserve the wildlife habitat across India. Okay, so this actually evolved by adding new components. So already there was a convention, that is the assistance for development of national park and the sanctuaries. This was already there, but then what happened, there were few components that was added to this particular assistance, and then what happened, evolved the integrated development of wildlife habitat, and now this actually covers a wide range of species and habitat protection efforts. Obviously, what will actually be the motive or the objective of such a scheme? Definitely for the protection and the development of the wildlife habitat, both within as well as outside the protected area, and there have to be targeted interventions. The second one is to conserve the critically endangered species and their habitats, and also in the current scenario there has to be technological interventions also in the management of wildlife. Okay, so this is what is the total objective of this particular scheme. So, who are the beneficiaries? It actually includes the tiger reserves, the elephant reserves, as well as so many other protected areas. How many tiger reserves? 55 tiger reserves, 33 elephant reserves, and around 700 protected areas are there, including the zones of influence. Okay, so this is actually the protection that is given to the wildlife. Okay, next one, if you see the components, of course we spoke, right, protection of wildlife outside the protected areas also. Next one, support the protected areas like the national parks, the wildlife sanctuaries, biosphere reserves, that is conservation reserves, as well as community reserves. And finally, recovery programs should be there in order to preserve and to restore the critically endangered species. So these are the different components of this integrated program. Now let's move forward to see the sub schemes. Okay, of course, you know, Project Tiger makes a big roar. Okay, so this particular chart here actually shows that India is home to around 70% of the global tiger population. If you see this one, it actually has around 3,682 tigers, followed by Russia, Indonesia, Nepal, etc. Okay, so this is what it is. So the objective of Project Tiger, launched in 1973, is to primarily preserve this particular endangered Bengal tigers. Okay, and the coverage is around 55 tiger reserves, and this is actually spread across almost 18 to 20 states. Okay, and that covers 5 major landscapes, and this supports Project Cheetah also, that is aimed at reintroducing the cheetahs. So of late you will be hearing, right, reintroducing cheetah into Kuno, then reintroducing cheetah into other national parks as well as wildlife sanctuaries, you will know. So this is what it is. So number one is Project Tiger. Next one is Project Elephant. If you actually see here, Project Elephant, so this beautiful and an intelligent animal is actually having a scientific name, that is Elephas maximus, and the IUCN status, if you see, it is vulnerable. Okay, it is vulnerable, and this particular project it actually came into existence in 1992 in order to protect the elephant species in India, and this is spread over 58,000 square kilometers. That is, that much is the protected area for this particular species, and approximately we have around 27,000 elephants in India. Okay, so this is what it is. So now the Project Elephant, as you know, it was actually brought about in 1992. Objective, of course, is to protect these elephants, the habitats, and also now you have to intervene. Okay, with respect to that of the human wildlife conflict that is happening majorly in Kerala. There are a lot of instances that are happening, right? and coverage around 22 elephant range states as well as UTs. Then what happened? This particular project got merged with Project Tiger from the financial year 2023 and 2024, and now it is called as Project Tiger and Elephant. So this has actually come together. Okay, now let us move forward and next see the Project Dolphin. These are also one of the most empathetic, intelligent, and the most beautiful animals, I have ever seen. Okay, so let's see. This is actually a mammal, it's not a fish. Anyways, you guys know it. So, this includes conservation initiatives like Project Dolphin, that is development of wildlife habitats. This includes the Project Dolphin also, as well as Project Lion, in order to protect them as well as habitat and their protected areas. Okay, so this is Project Dolphin, which particularly, aims at conservation of what? Gangetic dolphin. Okay, once the question was there in your exam. Okay, so the Gangetic dolphin, and the Gangetic dolphin actually faces a number of threats. What are the threats faced by the Gangetic dolphin? Let's say number one, it is by killing. So there can also be habitat fragmentation. Okay, how does this happen? By the constructions of dams as well as barrages. Okay, so this actually causes habitat fragmentation. And then there is also indiscriminate or overfishing. So there will be no food which is actually left for this particular species. So these are the threats. Okay, do you understand? So you have to also know which are the states where the dolphins are actually found. Okay, so this is what you have to see. Then these are the dolphins, whether they can actually live only in fresh water or they can also live in brackish water is something you need to see. Okay, so now we have actually completed these many topics. Okay, so what are all the topics we've completed? Let's just brush up quickly, or that will actually gives us a break from continuous discussion. So what are the topics that we have finished so far? We started with this topic of biodiversity. Yesterday we were actually discussing biodiversity, right? Over there we had actually started with this concept of tiger reserves and then moved on to understand what are biosphere reserves, and then we also discussed about this eco-sensitive areas. We discussed about coastal regulation zones, what are the relaxations that have been brought about by the CRZ notification of 2019, etc., etc. So today we continued the biodiversity with respect to what are all the meetings or the agreements, the conventions which were related in the preservation or conservation of biodiversity, one of which was the recent COP 16 of what? UNCBD. Okay, and there we actually discussed about the updated India's national biodiversity action plan that we discussed, and then we also saw the Kunming protocol or the Kunming Montreal biodiversity framework. What were the 30 is to 30 framework that it actually targets that it actually set, whether it is legally binding or not, all that we actually discussed. Then we moved forward and looked at the tiger conservation or the international big cat alliances, where we saw 7 different types of big cats, their conservation status under the IUCN, the WPA, as well as what? The CITES conservation. Okay, so we actually saw, except for jaguar as well as puma, all the other 5 big cats are found in India as well. And then we move to the tiger conservation alliances, where all the NGOs like the IUCN, the WWF, the traffic, everything came across in order to conserve the tiger population. Okay, so we saw how important is the tiger conservation, and then we dealt with that of the Jim Corbett Project Tiger of 1973, and also we discussed about the tiger conservation we have done, and discussed about what are all the different tiger reserves in India, the recent one being the Guru Ghasidas that was added in Chhattisgarh, and even any more recent ones are added, please do mention in the comment section so that it will be beneficial for all of us. And then we moved forward in looking at this integrated development of wildlife habitat, where we spoke that it encompasses in its components of all the habitats of these animals, like the Project Tiger we discussed. We saw about Project Elephant, which were now integrated in the financial year 2024. And finally, we saw the Project Dolphin. Okay. So after all this, now we have completed this particular topic of biodiversity. Okay. So successfully we have actually completed a number of topics, and here we have completed biodiversity. So what are all the topics that we have completed so far? Number one, ecosystems were done. Just a sense of satisfaction. That's why I'm just writing it down. Okay. Ecosystems were covered. Then key organizations were covered, national and global, which were in the news. Started with climate change. Mitigation was covered. Adaptation was covered. And COP29 was covered. COP16 was covered. And India's measures to it was covered. That is the greenwashing guidelines, eco-mark rules, etc. Then we moved on to biodiversity. In biodiversity, we actually discussed about the reserves and the eco-sensitive areas, and what is this UNCBD COP16, and we saw the International Big Cat Alliance and so on. So after this, now we are moving to another very important topic. So what is this topic? This topic is on pollution. As I told you, there are three major types of pollution. One is air pollution. Next one is water pollution. Next is soil pollution. And this is also the reason why there is lot of contamination of groundwater. Right? Now there are also other kinds of pollution. Light pollution, methane pollution, etc. Okay, so pollution is a very big topic, but then we have again segregated it, and what we will be dealing with is today three important topics on what this particular pollution, that is air pollution. There what we will be discussing about, we will be discussing about the air of Anthropocene initiative. Okay, this is number one. Then we'll talk about the National Clean Air Program. Okay, that is NCAP. And then whether what are the categories of cities over here, and whether they are actually abiding by the standards of NQAAS, that is National Air Quality, the Ambient Air Quality Standards. Okay, whether this is actually following it. And finally, we'll finish the lecture by discussing about a concept of ground level or tropospheric ozone. Very important. So here what is important is, you might think is the ground level tropospheric ozones, has any kind of or a single kind of emission source or anything? No, this actually is formed when there is the volatile organic substances, when they react with sunlight, this particular ground level or the tropospheric ozone is actually formed. It's a very dangerous and a 100 times, or you can say multiple times more potent than that of carbon dioxide. So it is a greenhouse gas. Okay, so this is what it is. How do we control that? All that we will discuss. Okay, so this is pollution. So now let us move. So in soil pollution and all, we will also be discussing about the solid waste management rules, the plastic waste management rules, the producer pay principle, all that we will discuss, don't worry. So air of the Anthropocene initiative. So if you are one of the, and if you are a geography optional student, you know what is Anthropocene, right? So for others, just leave this for now. Okay, so it is actually an international initiative, was created by artist Robin Price, that is called as the air of the Anthropocene. It is a visual representation of the quantum of pollution, okay, that is actually there in different countries, which includes India, Ethiopia and UK. So what did they use? They actually combined art plus science. Okay, so art as in they made use of digital paints, etc. In and also in science they actually used sensors. Okay, where they actually depicted what is the level of pollution in these countries. Let us actually see what is this air of Anthropocene. Can you see the digital paints over here? These are all paints, these are not lights. Okay, so they used it, and you can see the levels of pollution over here. Over here, can you see? Here you have clear skies. So this is called as this initiative, which was an international project which merged art as well as science to depict the status of air pollution by using the digital or the light painting. Okay, so the artists and the researchers actually came together, and they created the photographic evidence, okay, by using the digital light painting techniques, and low cost air pollution sensors were used in order to depict it. Okay, now moving forward, this is just a small reference. It was in the news. So they majorly found the major cause of this particular pollution was this particulate matter. Okay, so particulate matter. So you would have seen in newspapers, right? PM 2.5 and PM 10. What does this mean? PM 2.5 and 10. This 2.5 is nothing but it is the diameter of that particulate matter. So that is why it is called as a 2.5 micrometer. So it measures micrometer. Okay. So this is the meaning of PM 2.5, the size of it or the diameter of it. So what are PM or the particulate matter is that these are complex mix of the solid particles and the liquid droplets which are suspended in the air or the atmosphere. They can be both organic or they can be inorganic also, and actually includes a number of substances like it can be dust, it can be soot, it can be smoke, it can be liquid droplets, and this actually vary in size. That's why I told you PM 2.5 and PM 10. And long time or long term exposure to these particulate matter can actually create a lot of impact on the health or the health hazards. Okay, now let's move forward and see. It causes cardiovascular disease, and not only cardiovascular disease, also stroke and respiratory ailments are caused. Morbidity, mortality, that is death, is actually caused. And WHO says that 99% of the global population breathes in air that surpasses the safety standards of WHO. So WHO actually comes up with safe or ambient air quality index, right? But the air that we actually breathe in, specifically if you are from the NCR region, what happens? There are even holidays that are actually given to the students as well as the working people because of this pollution. Okay, that is particularly due to the high presence of the particulate matter. So this is what it is. Okay, now moving forward, if you see, this is PM 10, PM 1, where you can say all the particles, they actually have the diameter of around 1 micrometer. Here it is 2.5 micrometer and this is 10 micrometer. So this is the common particulate matter sizes that are actually present. All this is not important. Okay, so this is just telling that when it actually gets inside your body, you are inhaling it through your your nasal cavity, and then it goes into your lungs, and then it mixes with your bloodstream. All these things are actually being said over here. Not very important. Just know what is this particular particulate matter. Okay, so in terms of diameter, they are actually telling you. So how much is human hair and all these things? Not important. Leave it. So now let us actually move forward to the next one. So this is going to be the second last topic, and we have one more topic to come to the end. Okay. So the National Clean Air Program. Here, if you see, the Indian government under the Ministry of Environment, Forest and Climate Change has recently allocated some kind of funds. Okay. So much amount of funds, that is 10,422 crores. Okay, in order to implement what? This particular program, that is the National Clean Air Program, specifically in the states which actually has high concentration, or the cities which actually are experiencing high pollution due to the presence of the particulate matter level. So now, given that you know what are particulate matter, let us actually see here. So what does the NCAP program actually say? It actually says all the cities with high annual particulate matter level must develop and execute a clean air action plan. See, under every scheme they say, even under Kunming protocol, they actually said all the countries have to come together. You should have a national strategy as well as a action plan on how you are going to conserve your biodiversity. Similarly, under NCAP, you have to have the clean air action plan. And here if you see, most of the cities had actually submitted it, but the implementation actually varied widely. That is, if you see, only 60% of these allocated funds were used, and specifically if you see in cities like Vizag, that is Vishakhapatnam and Bengaluru, the expenditure was even 0%. Why was the delay in the implementation of the project? Was that there was delay in the approval mechanisms, okay, for what are all the processes actually have to be done, what are all the essential equipments for the process, everything was actually delayed, okay. What are the essential equipments? The sweepers, the electric buses, etc. So this is the status recently. Now let us actually move forward. We will now understand what is this NCEP. So this National Clean Air Program actually came pre-COVID. Remember, like that, Clean Air Program pre-COVID in the year 2019 by the Ministry of Environment, Forest and Climate Change, and it was brought forward as a long-term, time-bound national level strategy in order to curb the menace of air pollution problem. So this is a comprehensive framework which will look into the menace of air pollution in the country. So that was why it was brought about. What was the target? In order to reduce or 20 to 30% reduction of the PM10, particulate matter 10, as well as 2.5 by the year 2024. Okay. So by taking 2017 as the base year, it wanted to see that by 2024 we will actually reduce our concentration of particulate matter 2.5 and particulate matter 10 by what? 20 to 30% compared to that of the 2017 levels. Okay. Then the new updated target of 40% reduction by 2026 has been set recently. Very, very important. 40% from the 20 to 30, now we have moved to 40%. The coverage are, it covers 132 non-attainment cities. What do you mean by non-attainment cities? The cities which do not abide or which do not fall under the national air quality or the ambient air quality standards. Okay, so these are non-attainment cities. They have been identified by the Central Pollution Control Board based on their air quality data. Now let us quickly see what do you mean by the national air quality. Okay, it's over here. Let us actually see further. What is the plan? It has to take care of the air quality monitoring. Then it has to reduce the vehicular emissions. Okay, so whatever is the industrial and the vehicular emissions, and also keep the public aware of the amount of pollution that is actually happening. And for that only, there was this platform that was called as the Prana. This was actually launched. Stands for the portal for regulation of air pollution in the non-attainment cities, that is Prana. Okay, this is actually used for monitoring the implementation of NCEP. If you see the status of air quality of the 131 identified cities, decrease in PM10 concentration has been observed in 88 cities during this particular period when compared to that of 2017-18 level. So has there been an improvement? Yes, there has been an improvement. Okay, so this is what you need to know about the NCEP. And I told you, what do you mean by the non-attainment cities? And the non-attainment cities are those which do not stick to the NAAQ, I told you, right? So National Ambient Air Quality. So we need to know about these particular standards. What are the pollutants that are brought under the standards? Very, very important. Even the AQI, okay? So Air Quality Index, that takes into consideration which of the following pollutants become important, okay? So about these national ambient air quality standards, these are the standards for air quality in India. And who's the authority? Of course, it is the CPCB, the Central Pollution Control Board. Okay, so this sets the standard as mandated by the Air Act, that is the Air Prevention and Control of Pollution Act of 1981. Very important. So if you see the timeline, the first NAAQ, that is the Ambient Air Quality Standard, was developed in the year 1982. Then it was actually revised in 10 years, that is 1994, and again 1998. And the current one, if you see, it was actually updated in the year 2009. Very, very important. So what are the pollutants that are actually covered over here? There are 12 pollutants that are covered under this one, which includes the sulfur dioxide, then it has a nitrous dioxide, and it has the PM 2.5, it has PM 10, it has water vapor, ozone, lead, arsenic, nickel. If you see, all these are here. Benzene, as well as ammonia. See, and benzopyrene. These are the kind of pollutants they will pick up for asking questions. Okay, so benzopyrene is also included here. Benzene, nickel, arsenic is also included over here. It aims at monitoring and implementation, and the compliance of this is monitored by what? National Air Quality Monitoring Program, that is NAMP. Okay, so this is what it is, and again NAMP is implemented by the Central Pollution Control Board. So this is what is your National Ambient Air Quality Standards, and if the cities don't meet that, then what happens? They are actually kept under the non-attainment cities under the National Air Quality or the National Clean Air Program, NCAP. Okay, which was brought by the government in 2019. So now we will actually move to the last topic of the day, that is the ground level ozone. Okay, so as I already discussed with you guys, what do you mean by ground level ozone? It is also called as the tropospheric ozone. So you know different layers of this atmosphere, right? It has the troposphere, it has the stratosphere, you know, the ionosphere, you know, you all these layers of the atmosphere, right? So this particular ozone, that is O3, is actually present in two layers. That is, one is the stratosphere and the next one is called as the troposphere. So we know that ozone is actually a good gas. This actually protects the life on the earth by absorbing the UV, that is the ultraviolet radiation from the sunlight, we know, right? Okay, so this is also correct. But there is ozone which also is found in the troposphere at the height of around 10 kilometers from the ground. Okay, so this is called as the tropospheric or the ground level ozone. So now let us actually see. So there was a recent study that was done by a Delhi based think tank, not important. They had just said, we are actually having a higher risk of ground level ozone or the tropospheric ozone over here across the major cities of India. That's what they said. The most affected cities, of course, the first is Delhi NCR. Okay, so these have actually, that is the amount of ozone which was present exceeded the India's national standard. What is India's national standard? What is the amount or the ambient, the measure of which these ground level ozone should be present is 100 nu G per meter cube. So as an 8-hour mean value, this has to be there, and 180 nu G per meter cube should be for 1 hour. Okay, so this is what is the mean value. So most of the cities have actually gone above this standards, and also there is extended duration of exposure. Okay, so there's an exposure of 12 to 15 hours a day was actually studied in the cities, specifically in Mumbai. Okay, so this is not important, but it's just for you to know. So about the ozone, it exists in two layers. I told you, the stratosphere, that is the upper layer, and a level up to 10 kilometers from the ground, that is called as the troposphere. If you guys have to see this diagram, let me zoom it for you. I hope this is visible now. So types of ozone, depending on where it is found, it is either harmful or it is useful. If it is stratospheric, this is naturally occurring over here and protects the earth from UV. Okay, and if it is tropospheric, this is because of the reaction between the sunlight and the chemicals which is released by the humans, like volatile organic compounds, etc., and it actually happens to be a powerful greenhouse gas. So because of this, there is increase in the temperature. When there is increase in the temperature, there is global warming. Okay, so this is what is actually mentioned over here, and this also affects the human health as well as the ecosystem, the crop production. Everything is affected by this particular ground level ozone, and it does not have a single source of emission. Do you understand? So this is what is the ground level ozone. Now let's move forward. About the ground level ozone, also called as the tropospheric ozone, it is actually a secondary, or it is called as a short lived climate pollutant, okay, that remains in the atmosphere for around hours to weeks, but then it keeps on extending, that is hours to weeks, and extended period of time and prolonged exposure is very dangerous. So no direct emission, it's only with the sunlight with volatile organic compounds, including it can be methane, nitrogen oxides, etc., which is actually emitted in large quantity by the anthropogenic activities. Now moving forward, if we see what are the impacts, of course it has impact on the climate. It absorbs a lot. It actually acts as a potential greenhouse gas by absorbing the incoming solar radiation, thereby global warming. Second, health. Obviously, you have a lot of diseases like the breathing issues, your bronchitis is there, asthma, and permanent damage to the tissues is done. Then also on agriculture as well as ecosystem impacts, because this actually disrupts the process of photosynthesis for the plants, thereby it actually inhibits the overall growth of certain species of plants. The next one, what are the strategies of prevention? You have to definitely reduce these volatile organic compounds being emitted into the atmosphere. Specifically, if you see the nitrous oxides as well as methane has to be whatever comes out from what your crop residue, whatever comes from your livestock or the power plants, that has to be reduced over here. So this is about the ground level ozone and the impact. Okay, so here we've completed 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, and we are over here 5. Tomorrow we will try to complete the remaining portions of your pollution. Okay, we will actually be starting with your water pollution tomorrow. What are all the initiatives? And we will move on to the other types of pollution like the soil pollution and then the light pollution. Okay, and we will see other important conventions or the agreements that have been brought forth by, or the policies, national policies that India has brought forward. So with this, we've actually come to the end of our discussion. That is the fifth lecture of environment and ecology series, and for more such lectures, please do subscribe to Narayana IAS Academy YouTube channel. And tomorrow I shall actually meet you in the sixth lecture of the most important prelims course, that is prelims 2025 of current affairs, specifically environment and ecology. So we'll actually meet you all tomorrow. Thank you and take care.